Section 27, Reverse Discrimination, Today's Fair Housing Rules and Regulations, 2026 Standard. Introduction, Understanding a Misunderstood Concept. As we move forward from Section 26, where we walked step by step through HUD's complaint process and how enforcement unfolds, we now shift into a concept that often creates confusion, debate, and even misunderstanding in the real estate industry: reverse discrimination. This section ties directly back to earlier discussions on protected classes, disparate impact, Section 14, and fair housing enforcement, Section 19. In 2026, it is critical for real estate professionals to understand that not all actions that appear to favor one group over another are violations. In fact, many of these actions are designed to correct past discrimination and promote equal opportunity. Understanding the difference between unlawful discrimination and lawful corrective measures is key to compliance. What is reverse discrimination? Clarifying the term. Reverse discrimination is a term used to describe actions or efforts intended to reverse the negative effects of past discrimination against historically marginalized groups. While the term can sound like a role reversal, that is not its true meaning. It does not mean that one group is now being unfairly treated in place of another. Instead, it refers to efforts designed to level the playing field by ensuring that groups who were previously excluded have access to the same opportunities as others. This ties directly back to the purpose of fair housing laws: not to create advantage, but to create equal opportunity. How it works. Real-world application. To understand how this concept applies in practice, consider affirmative action programs. These programs were developed to address long-standing inequalities in education, employment, and housing by encouraging inclusion of underrepresented groups. For example, institutions may take proactive steps to ensure that minorities are given opportunities that were historically denied to them due to discrimination. Another example is the Fair Housing Act itself. Before its passage, it was legal to deny housing based on race or other characteristics. The act was designed to reverse those effects by prohibiting such discrimination and opening housing opportunities to everyone. In this sense, reverse discrimination is not about exclusion, it is about inclusion and access. The role of disparate impact. Connecting the dots. This concept also ties closely to disparate impact, which we discussed earlier in the course. Disparate impact focuses on policies that are neutral on their face but have a discriminatory effect on protected classes. HUD's three-step analysis evaluates whether such policies create unequal outcomes and whether less discriminatory alternatives exist. For example, a lending policy that sets a minimum loan amount may appear neutral, but if it disproportionately excludes minority applicants due to property values in certain areas, it may still violate fair housing laws. In this situation, the goal is not to penalize the lender unfairly, but to ensure that policies do not unintentionally create barriers to equal access. 2026. Insight Fair Housing Law focuses on outcomes, not just intent. Criticism and controversy. Why the term creates debate. Reverse discrimination has been the subject of ongoing debate. Some critics argue that programs designed to assist historically disadvantaged groups may create an imbalance or unfair advantage. However, this perspective often misunderstands the purpose of these programs. These efforts are not intended to disadvantage others, but rather to correct systemic inequalities that existed for decades. The goal is not to flip the system, but to ensure that everyone has a fair chance to participate. This is an important distinction for real estate professionals. Misunderstanding this concept can lead to incorrect assumptions about what is legal or illegal under fair housing law. High-profile examples. Law in action. Over time, reverse discrimination concepts have appeared in major legal and political discussions. For example, portions of the Voting Rights Act were challenged on the grounds that they applied differently to certain states. While these laws were originally designed to prevent discrimination, courts have reviewed whether they remain necessary over time. Similarly, programs such as affirmative action in education and employment have faced legal challenges regarding equal protection under the law. These cases highlight the ongoing balancing act between correcting past discrimination and ensuring fairness for all individuals, the legacy of civil rights. Why these efforts exist. To fully understand reverse discrimination, you must look at the history behind it. The civil rights movement exposed deep inequalities in housing, education, and employment. Programs like affirmative action, fair housing enforcement, and even school integration efforts were created to address these disparities and create equal opportunities moving forward. For example, minority communities were historically restricted to certain neighborhoods through practices like redlining and steering. fair housing laws were enacted to break down those barriers and provide access to housing regardless of race or background. These efforts were not about preference, they were about correcting systemic exclusion. The pattern: inclusion versus exclusion. At this point in the course, the pattern becomes clear. Unlawful discrimination excludes individuals based on protected characteristics, limits access to housing or services, creates unequal treatment. Lawful corrective action, often labeled reverse discrimination, promotes inclusion, expands access, addresses historical inequities. Understanding this distinction is critical in 2026, bringing it all together, the 2026 professional perspective. In today's real estate environment, the concept of reverse discrimination should not be viewed as a violation, but as part of the broader effort to ensure fairness and equal opportunity in housing. As a professional, your role is to understand the purpose behind fair housing laws, recognize how policies impact different groups, avoid assumptions based on terminology, focus on equal treatment and access. Because in 2026, success in real estate is not just about transactions, it is about operating within a framework that promotes fairness, inclusion, and compliance. The takeaway is simple. Fair housing law is not about giving one group an advantage, it is about making sure no group is left behind. Online discussion. Question 1. What is the purpose of reverse discrimination? Answer: to address and correct the effects of past discrimination by promoting equal opportunity for historically marginalized groups. Question 2. How does reverse discrimination differ from unlawful discrimination? Answer: reverse discrimination aims to promote inclusion and equal access, while unlawful discrimination excludes or limits individuals based on protected classes. Question 3. Why is understanding this concept important for real estate professionals? Answer: because misunderstanding it can lead to incorrect assumptions about fair housing compliance and legal responsibilities.